If you look at a sunset over the ocean and you just call it good, and I look at the exact same sunset and I call it sublime, we aren't just using different words to describe the same event.
Right. No, we're definitely not.
According to linguists and philosophers, our brains are actually processing two entirely different physical realities.
Which is wild to think about.
It really is. So, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are exploring a massive invisible force that dictates absolutely everything you experience.
Everything.
Yeah. We're pulling from this incredible set of research and excerpts, specifically centered around a concept from a text called The Architecture of Words, Building Your World Through Language. And the premise we're unpacking today is bold. It argues that vocabulary isn't just some tool for communication. It is, quite literally, your greatest cognitive power.
It is a radical shift in how we think about human perception. And I think we need to establish our mission right out the gate here.
Right.
Because the word vocabulary, it triggers some very specific, often pretty tedious memories for people.
Oh, for sure. Flashcards, spelling tests, all of that.
Exactly. But this deep dive is not about memorizing dictionary definitions so you can sound smarter in a boardroom. It's an exploration into how the act of acquiring new words literally constructs the reality you inhabit.
Wow.
Yeah, it's custom tailored for you, the listener, as a shortcut to understanding how language shapes perception on a neurological level.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand the actual mechanics of how a word can physically alter your perception of a sunset, we have to start with the foundational philosophy driving this entire concept. And that roots back to the philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein. His famous assertion is, the limits of my language are the limits of my world.
Right.
So the argument here is that your lived reality only expands as far as your vocabulary allows it to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Think about someone whose default adjective for everything positive is just the word good.
Right.
A meal is good. A movie is good. A really deep, meaningful conversation with an old friend is just, right, it's good. A sunset is good. The philosophical argument is that if you only possess that one word, your actual internal experiences are inherently constrained by that boundary.
Okay.
But if you integrate words like exquisite, sublime, or superb into your daily operating system, you aren't just decorating your speech. Your brain actually begins to perceive entirely different levels of reality.
Now, I have to play this skeptical learner here for a second, because the physics of that claim, it requires a little pushback.
Fair enough. Go for it.
Let's go back to that sunset. If we're standing side by side on the beach, the exact same photons are bouncing off the atmosphere and hitting both of our retinas, right?
Yes, exactly the same.
The light waves are identical. The temperature of the air is identical. So physically speaking, the reality hasn't changed at all. Aren't we just, I don't know, putting a more expensive linguistic sticker on the exact same box?
See, that is the crucial distinction to make, because you're absolutely right about the physics. The photons hitting the retina, they are identical. But reality, as you and I actually experience it, is not just raw sensory data.
Oh.
Reality is how the brain processes, categorizes, and assigns meaning to those photons. This is where we get into the cognitive science side of things.
Right, how the brain actually handles the data.
Exactly. When sensory input enters the brain, it actively searches for a schema, like a mental container, to sort that information. So what happens in the mind when you lack the specific categories to sort your experiences?
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah. If your brain only has the mental drawer labeled good, then that stunning once-in-a-lifetime sunset gets filed in the exact same neurological real estate as a perfectly average turkey sandwich.
Wow. Okay, so essentially by lacking the vocabulary, we're subjecting ourselves to a sort of cognitive blindness.
Yes.
The sandwich and the sunset are sharing a drawer, which just entirely flattens the human experience.
Precisely. You're discarding the nuance because you lack the linguistic container to hold it. When you acquire the word sublime, you are physically building a new mental drawer.
You're upgrading the filing cabinet.
Exactly. You're creating a new neural pathway for your brain to use. Vocabulary dictates our capacity to process and categorize reality.
So without the word.
If you don't possess the word sublime, the raw feeling of sublimity might temporarily wash over you, but your conscious brain cannot hold on to it. It just slips right through your fingers because there's no semantic network to catch it and record it as a distinct memory.
That is fascinating.
Yeah.
And if that's how we categorize external visual inputs, like a sunset, it raises a massive question about what happens when we apply that exact same limitation to our internal emotional states.
Oh, absolutely.
Which brings us to the architecture of English itself and what the source text calls the power of nuance. We know that English, despite its many flaws, has an incredibly vast reservoir of highly specific words.
It does.
But nuance isn't just about sounding poetic.
Not at all. What's fascinating here is that nuance is the mechanism that separates a blunt, generalized observation from a truly profound realization. It's the ultimate tool for navigating complex human psychology.
Right. It's like, okay, imagine you're handed a box of 8 standard crayons.
Okay, the basic 8.
Yeah, the basic 8. If you're asked to draw the world around you with just those 8 tools, what do you create? You draw a generic red fire truck. You draw a generic blue sky. A basic yellow sun.
Right.
Your representation of the world is entirely limited by the blunt instruments in your hand. But if someone hands you a box of 100 crayons, suddenly you have access to crimson, scarlet, ruby, cerulean, and indigo.
The whole spectrum.
Exactly. The nuance in that larger box allows you to create vivid, complex, highly specific masterpieces instead of just generic sketches.
And if we apply that 100-crayon analogy to the human brain, we start to see why this is a survival mechanism, not just an artistic one.
A survival mechanism.
Yes, because we are constantly drawing our internal emotional landscapes. If you only have the 8-crayon box of emotional vocabulary, your internal palette is dangerously blunt. You have mad, sad, glad, and scared.
The primary colors of emotion.
Right, the primary colors.
But human experience is almost never primary. I mean, let's say you go through a major life transition. You move to a new city or you change careers and you feel entirely unmoored. If your only available emotional crayon is sad, you're basically trying to paint this swirling, complex masterpiece of human grief and transition with one thick, blunt instrument.
And that blunt instrument actually increases your psychological distress.
Wait, really? How so?
This is where the neuroscience gets really fascinating. There's a concept in psychology called affect labeling.
Affect labeling, okay.
Yeah. Brain imaging studies show that when people are experiencing emotional distress, their amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, is highly active.
Right, the alarm bells are ringing.
Exactly. But when a person can put a highly specific, nuanced label on what they are feeling, a different part of the brain engages. The prefrontal cortex, which handles logic and regulation, lights up, and it physically downregulates the amygdala.
Oh, wow.
It acts like a neurological braking system.
So by naming the emotion accurately, you are literally turning down the volume on your brain's panic response.
Exactly. But you can only do that if you have the words. If you only have sad, the amygdala just keeps firing.
Right, because it doesn't feel understood or processed.
Exactly. But if you possess the 100-crayon vocabulary, and you can identify that you aren't just sad, you're experiencing melancholy or nostalgia, ennui, or despair, you are giving your prefrontal cortex the precise tool it needs to process the threat.
That makes so much sense.
Naming the emotion is the first biological step to processing it. A nuanced vocabulary is a vital regulatory tool for navigating your own mind.
Okay, so if nuance is the ultimate tool for navigating our emotions and constructing our reality, it points to a pretty glaring issue. We are largely not taught language this way.
No, we are not. Not at all.
I mean, we've been completely conditioned by traditional schooling to treat words as chores. We're taught to look at a list of definitions, memorize them for a Friday quiz.
Spit them out on a Scantron?
Exactly, and completely forget them by Monday. This completely bypasses the cognitive connection required to actually use these words as tools in the real world.
It's a major structural flaw in how we learn, honestly. And the text points out that it requires a complete dichotomy shift. We have to move from being a student of language to becoming a collector.
A collector?
Yeah. The traditional student is engaged in a fleeting transactional exercise. They cram definitions into their short-term working memory just to pass a test.
Right.
But a collector operates entirely differently. A collector engages in a mindset called lexical curiosity.
Lexical curiosity. I love that term. The way this is described in the text is basically treating language like an archaeological dig. It's about finding beauty in the architecture of a word, falling in love with how it sounds, and tracing the history of its etymology. A collector isn't looking to pass a standardized test. They're looking for a new lens through which to view their daily life.
Perfectly said.
But, practically speaking, how does one practically manufacture that emotional connection the text talks about? How do you force your brain to care about a random string of letters so deeply that it bypasses short-term memory and becomes a permanent fixture in your operating system?
You do it by giving the brain a narrative.
A story.
Yes. Human memory is incredibly inefficient at retaining isolated facts, but it is highly optimized for retaining stories. When you just repeat a definition 10 times, your brain flags that as temporary data. It lacks what we call semantic encoding.
Okay.
But when you apply lexical curiosity, when you look up the etymology of a word, you're attaching a rich narrative framework to it.
Oh, take the word clue, for example, from the text.
Yeah, great example.
If you just memorize clue as a synonym for hint, it's boring data. But if you trace its etymology, you find out that the word clue originally meant a ball of yarn.
Right.
It traces all the way back to the Greek myth of Theseus, who used a ball of yarn to navigate his way into the Minotaur's labyrinth and find his way back out safely. Once you know that, the word clee isn't just a hint on a crossword puzzle. It is literally a thread leading you out of confusion and darkness.
And notice what just happened in your brain when you uncovered that history.
Yeah, you feel it.
You felt a spark of discovery. You experienced a minor dopamine release. That emotional connection, that little hit of neurochemical reward from appreciating a word's history is the exact mechanism that cements it.
Wow, so the emotion locks it in.
Dopamine acts like a save button in the brain. It signals the hippocampus to move that word from short-term memory into your permanent semantic network. You stop collecting words for an exam, and you start acquiring them because they're deeply useful, historic tools.
Okay, let's actually put this toolkit into practice then. Because shifting from a student to a collector means we need to look at our vocabulary in action.
Let's do it.
There's a specific high-level collection of words in the text that perfectly illustrates how acquiring a new term shifts your behavior. Let's look at 4 specific terms, not as definitions to memorize, but as new behavioral lenses.
The first lens is the verb to broaden. The standard definition is to expand one's horizons or knowledge. But if you think like a collector, applying that word to your life changes your posture towards the unknown.
Right, because if your goal in a conversation or, say, a career move is simply to learn something, that implies a passive intake of information. You're just receiving it.
Right. You're just a bucket being filled.
Exactly.
Okay.
But if your internal directive is to broaden, that carries physical weight. You are actively physically pushing the walls of your own mental landscape outward. You're stretching the borders of your reality. It's an active state of cognitive expansion.
Beautifully put. Now, the second word to examine is intricate, defined as very detailed or complicated. Now, contrast using the word intricate with calling something hard or frustrating.
Oh, man. Think about a conflict at work or a misunderstanding with your partner. If you label that situation frustrating or impossible, your brain treats it like a solid brick wall.
Right.
You're incentivized to just walk away. But if you apply the word intricate to that exact same human conflict, the entire framework changes.
It completely shifts your psychological approach. Because intricate implies a design.
Yeah.
A spider web is intricate. A Swiss watch is intricate. When you label a problem intricate, you're acknowledging that the details are interwoven in a complex but logical way.
It has a pattern.
Exactly. You stop seeing the conflict as a stubborn obstacle to be avoided, and you start seeing it as a knot that simply requires careful, patient untangling. You shift from a state of frustration to a state of curiosity just by changing the label.
That is the power of the 100 crayon docs in real time. And it leads perfectly into the third word, which I think is the ultimate 100 crayon word, vivid.
Oh, vivid is great.
Producing powerful, bright, or clear images in the mind. When you operate with a vivid vocabulary, you aren't just recalling past events, you're rendering them in 4K resolution. You enhance your own memory recall because you are attaching specific, highly charged adjectives to your experiences.
You're painting with the full palette. And the final phrase acts as the engine for this entire mindset. It's the phrase to stumble upon.
To stumble upon. Finding something by chance.
Yeah.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because I think this captures the pure joy of lexical curiosity.
Definitely.
Because you don't always march into the world with a flashlight, actively hunting for a specific vocabulary word to solve a problem. Sometimes you're just reading an old novel, or you're deeply engaged in a conversation, and you stumble upon a word that flawlessly captures a feeling you've carried around inside your chest for a decade but could never articulate.
It's the best feeling.
It's like finding a missing puzzle piece just lying on the sidewalk.
And from a neurological standpoint, keeping the phrase stumble upon active in your mind primes your reticular activating system, the part of your brain that filters information.
Okay, so it changes what you notice.
It trains your brain to constantly look for serendipity. If we tie these four terms, broaden, intricate, vivid, and stumble upon, back to the Wittgenstein premise that opened this deep dive, the architecture is totally clear. By mastering specific words, you physically broaden your internal world. You develop the patience to untangle intricate daily challenges. Your memories and emotional processing become vivid, and you remain highly receptive to stumbling upon new perspectives.
It's a total reconstruction of how you navigate your own life. And, the most beautiful synthesis of this entire concept from the text is this grand metaphor about how we live within our own minds. Think of your mind as a house.
Okay.
Every single new word you truly acquire is a new window knocked into the walls of that house.
It's such a brilliant way to visualize cognitive expansion.
Right. Imagine living in a house with only one or two windows. You can only view the outside world from a couple of highly restricted angles. The vast majority of your house is sitting in deep shadow.
That's the 8 crayon box.
Exactly. That is the world where every experience is simply good or bad. But every time you embrace lexical curiosity, every time you act as a collector and discover a nuanced word like sublime or ennui or intricate, you take a sledgehammer to the drywall.
You open it up.
You knock out a brand new window, and you let a completely unique angle of light flood into your mind. The ultimate directive here isn't to study English, it's to build your world.
And as we close out this deep dive, that metaphor of the house places the responsibility firmly on us as individuals navigating our own consciousness.
It really does.
It leaves us with a critical, ongoing challenge. If every nuanced word is a window letting light into your internal house, what parts of your own mind, your own emotions, or your own potential are currently sitting in the dark, simply because you haven't yet stumbled upon the right word to illuminate them?